let's talk about it.
Hello and welcome back to Thicc Radio, the podcast where we talk about gaining, feedism, and everything in their orbit. I'm James.
And I'm Tim, so let's get into it. Today we're welcoming to the show for the first time. Today we've got a special guest, BigBull.
Hello.
Hey guys, glad to be here.
Good. How are you today?
Not too bad. It's finally not freezing cold today.
Yeah, that polar vortex was the son of a bitch.
Thank you so much for joining us today. We really we appreciate having you on. We've been very excited to have you on. And today we're going to be talking about something, it's, I think on the podcast, it's not that we do this intentionally, right? But obviously with the breakdowns, you sort of focus on one thing and then another. We've talked about muscle in some episodes. We've talked about fat in plenty. But today we're kind of meshing the two together and talking about that lovely combo of being just a sort of big old chunky boy across all the different dimensions. So listen, BigBull, are you ready to get into it?
Sure, let's do this.
Fantastic. So first things first, when did you first come into your gaining journey?
So I think I knew like from really early on that I was into muscle, I was into big bellies, and I grew up extremely skinny, extremely underweight. I think I graduated college at like 160. I hated being that size, hated being small. And I think it was really started to get to the gym first thing, post-college, started lifting more intensely. And I think it was probably started like 2007. I started really lifting and kept with that. Was actually really lean for a long time. I was probably at like 210, 220 for most of that time. Had abs, but I was always really like any one of those other gym bunnies. It's always just dieting down every 6 months, and bulking would be like, oh, I'd put on like 5 pounds for a few months. I honestly think it wasn't until like maybe 2018, 2019. I was at some gay event, and I just happened to like run into a couple other like muscle gainers who, hanging out with them and seeing what they look like and just sort of like comparing myself, I realized like I just really wasn't happy with my size or what I looked like. Like that's what I wanted to look like. And from that point on, I kind of just dedicated myself more to eating as much as I could to put on weight and to beef up.
Nice. I mean, I think it's interesting, right? Because to my mind, I think you're someone who is visually so iconic with, your shape and your presence in the online space. I think sometimes we forget, people who attain such a status of, as I say, being iconic, we forget that people come from very similar beginnings, and actually a lot of our journeys carry very similar parallels. Sometimes when we talk with muscle gainers, there is this moment where people forget that actually we share a similar thing of you look at yourself thin and you're like, this is not what I want. I want a little bit more. So I love hearing that journey, and it is wonderful to see. I mean, Tim, and I love to reference you in these moments because you've always said you try to gain a little bit of muscle.
I tried.
You
Well,
try.
and I still could. The problem is I absolutely hate working out. It is not something that I enjoy in any way. I've joined gyms. I've had personal trainers. I have a Bowflex in my basement collecting dust. I just can't seem to get motivated. And the problem is that I can't really find anybody local, like not even a friend who's dedicated either, because like I don't like going it alone, honestly. I hate going to a gym by myself. For some reason, I always feel really insecure going to a gym by myself. I don't know where that comes from, but if I could find someone who was willing to like, give me a dedicated like workout routine that I could stick to, I would do that because I'm getting kind of tired of having to pay somebody I don't know to do it.
Well, if it helps, I could probably add to that a little bit. Is when I was first starting out, like one of the things I did was that I really couldn't afford a personal trainer for full time like that. But like this sounds terrible. You could hire someone for a couple of weeks to get you set up and get you moving, and then not hire them anymore. But and as far as facilities go, just because I've been in the gym now for 2 decades, every gym has a different environment and has like a different crowd. Just has a different vibe to it. And there's some gyms where it's like gung ho bodybuilding, where these guys are just intense and they're are terrifying to work out around. And then there's some where people are just kind of like loafing around without just sitting on equipment, not doing anything. So I think like really the trick is that I just encourage people to just try out different gyms. And everyone has like usually like a free gym day or like a free workout that you can go in and to just go in and just see how you feel around other people. Are these people you want to be around for like an hour and a half every day?
I think the major problem I run into is like, and this is back when I was, paying a really expensive membership and paying for the personal trainer service. It's like I would schedule with him and then I would cancel like 5 minutes before I was supposed to walk out the door. I'd be like, I need to go work out. I know I need to. I'm paying for it, but I really want to stay here and watch TV.
And I think just like really for me, it could be a personality thing too. I know that I'm really ADD and I hyper focus on things. And uh, for me, it's if I could do something for 30 days, like it's harder for me to not do it at that point. So it's like if I could just commit to doing something for like 4 weeks, doing it per that schedule, it just becomes a habit. It's harder for me to not do it.
I think that's a very fair point, and it's the same thing with typical fat gaining as well. When you're skinny and starting out, sure, you don't have the same capacity as other people, but you have to set yourself up the framework that's going to help you to grow. Speaking a little bit more, I guess, about that kind of blend, fat and muscle specifically, I know you told us about that journey. Was there a time for you where, like, you specifically struggled a little bit, and at the point in which you kind of accepted it for yourself, like, what was that moment like?
I think for me it was definitely the first 20 or 30 pounds. Like to go from like really lean to like really just try to go full on ball gut look. I think what happens is that people perceive you how you've been for some amount of time. So for me, it was everyone knew that I was this lean person that was really cut. And for normal people, straight people out there, like that's the conversation they always want to have with you. It's like, oh, what's your diet like? Are you eating chicken and rice? Like, oh, that's such a commitment, right? And so as you start putting on a little bit of weight, like I think people just don't know how to react to that so much. And there is sort of like a shifting of your own um, personal perception, right? That like, oh, I'm not that lean person anymore. But you know, that first 20 or 30 pounds, it doesn't look like it's obvious, or it doesn't look like I'd say now when you look at me, it's obvious that I that I have a belly and that I'm intentionally being this size, as opposed to like 20 pounds just kind of seems like, oh, do you like fall off the wagon? Like
It's interesting. I think this comes back to a lot of that conversation we have around people's perceptions of us and the way in which people feel like they have an ownership of their perception of us. It's this really weird moment where when people kind of critique changes to your body, and it kind of boils down to like, oh, why are you getting big? You're a small person in my mind. Why are you changing that? I don't like that you're changing that because I don't like that I have to have a shift in how I see you, how I treat you, which is kind of just proof in the pudding that all this idea around like size and weight and gender and everything, it's all very like what we make of it. So it's interesting then when people kind of put, ironically, weight on that value, but also really just shows the importance of like going your own way and doing your own thing. As you say, 20 to 30 pounds looks very differently back then to the way 20 and 30 pounds looks now. And I imagine that in that time, there's a real transformation in confidence, in the way that you see yourself, and maybe even the way you carry yourself in the world. Like, if I can ask, what do you feel like in that journey has been the biggest change for you?
hmm, like one of the things I do get from gaining, or one of the things I wanted to get from it, and I do feel like I gain from it, is just there is that confidence, like there's that sense of power that like, um, because I started out so small, like I perceive the extra weight, the exercise as like a more of a powerful presence in a room, and uh, just in general, it's what helps me to keep motivating me to move forward.
I love that. And touching maybe a little here on, yeah, I know that not everyone is big on the conversation around health and mental health at times, but I mean, have you noticed a particular shift in either your physical and mental health in that time?
I would say physically, like uh, physically, I do feel the difference, right? Things that I used to be able to like bounce around very very quickly, like I'm just not as fast. I tell it slows me down. Like it's being bigger is a more cumbersome thing, and so it's like physically I feel that. I'd say as far as health goes, uh, this is something that I've done since I was starting to go to the gym. So I always go to the doctor at least about twice a year. Always get blood work done, which I just recommend for anyone, honestly, because it's. I think a lot of people are just afraid to go because they don't want to know there's a problem. But for example, last year I was using a Gator product that was spiking my cholesterol and actually making me pre-diabetic. But then by just making a change in that product, um, both have gone back down. Like my cholesterol's back to normal. I'm not pre-diabetic anymore. Um, and that's something that I wouldn't have known if I didn't get my blood work done.
I mean, Tim, again, to put to you here as a nurse, the conversation around health is tricky.
Yes.
Obviously, it's at anyone's discretion to decide what they do, what they don't do, what they want to do. It's all valid, do what you like. But also, as a nurse,
Mm.
like when it comes to the weight gain process, and obviously there are these expectations about what changes we can expect when our health begins to deteriorate. In your opinion, what kind of signs do people need to look out for? If they have a hesitancy to go to the doctor, what are some signs that they should probably look out for that makes them go, oh, I should probably go get a checkup?
There's not usually any physical symptoms attached to high cholesterol because it's kind of that silent killer in a way. But symptoms of diabetes and like hypertension are easier to identify. So like if if you're pre-diabetic or you may have already you may already have it. Some of the symptoms is like when you have low blood sugar, you get dizzy, you get confused, you break out in a cold sweat, you you feel like you might pass out. If you have high blood sugar, you get very jittery, you get very hot, but you're not breaking a sweat. It's like hot and dry, which is like, how do I explain? Like, if you've ever experienced this, it's like your body's heating up, but you're not sweating to release any of that heat. And then, like, symptoms of hypertension are like vertigo and dizziness when your blood pressure is really high, frequent urination because high blood pressure affects your kidneys. So it's like squeezing more water out of your body, as your blood pressure is going up. So those are things to look out for, but also those can be symptoms of a million other things. And that's the problem is most people mm, uh, confuse what they're experiencing with what they think is going on. Like, oh, I'm just this or that. But I don't think that you have to go more often than twice a year to see your doctor unless you know that there is a problem, unless you and your doctor have been talking about, hey, last time you were in, I noticed this and we need to work on it. Like then obviously go more frequently. But if you're generally healthy and you're not experiencing any symptoms that give you any alarm, you're fine with just going twice a year and getting blood work. I think it's every 6 months. Is that again, yeah, twice a year.
Then as far as mental health, that's sort of a double-edged sword. Literally anyone in like the fitness world, bodybuilding, physique, uh, and I'm assuming probably in Gainerism as well, is that there's just dysmorphia. Like I never perceive my body for the size that it is. I always think I'm like a lot of times I still think I'm that 160-pound guy. Like it's as confident as I could be in my body sometimes. Like there are just days where you just feel small.
It's reassuring to hear someone of a particular size iterating that that's not an uncommon occurrence. Sometimes I feel like when we have these conversations, there's this tendency that people kind of expect, like, oh, we're going to hear the glory. And obviously, it's nice to talk about the good times, but also the reality is social media only really prompts us to show the good. There is a lot of struggle for some of us, and sometimes that struggle is what it is, sometimes it's something else. And it is good, I think, to hear that from different people and yourself especially. So thank you. Thank you for being so willing to share.
I know that I've definitely taken for granted that people in your position experience the same kind of insecurities that I do, because like when I when I look out at even my local gay community that has nothing to do with any kind of fetishes, and I see guys that are built like you know, I it seems, at least from my perspective, that you guys sometimes have an easier time ingratiating into many different kind of groups, because your body type is something that is appealing to skinny twinks and to big bears and other muscle gainers, and leather people. Like, your body type is hugely popular in the leather community. And then I think about me, and I'm like, I don't look like you. I know that there are certain groups that I'm not going to be able to float as freely between. So, and then it's my own hang up. But like I said, I take for granted the fact that everyone's got the same kinds of issues around their body and their body image. And so, like, yeah, James said, it's refreshing to hear that, because I think a trap that a lot of people fall into is that we just assume that because you look the way you do and you're so popular and everybody wants you, that your life is just a breeze, and you have no problems dating, and you have no problems hooking up, and you have no problems with, your sex life. I feel like I lost the plot halfway through saying this. But do you get what I'm
Uh,
saying?
yeah. And it's like that's kind of the joke, is that usually like the more phenomenal a physique I see from someone, the more I realize they're the more demons they're probably dealing with. Like,
Yeah, I mean, it seems kind of fair. It's like, oh, you have so much energy to devote into this amazing transformation because you're trying to take it away from somewhere else, maybe. Which, of course, is no shades of people who put fantastic work into their bodies. But I don't know. I think it's always good to remind people that there is a human element to every single person we see online, no matter how we, because it's us that do it. We project the expectation. We project the notion of, oh, you're going to be like this. I think this of you. It's a projection. And we forget that there is a person behind all that. So again, I think it's very important to remember that no matter what gaining journey someone's on, or any journey, really, uh, think about the person behind it, and maybe give some space to that person to breathe a bit, because sometimes social media can be a bit stifling, I think, when you're feeling this need to try to project a certain vibe. I know I've fallen into that trap in the past, where it feels like, no, I have to keep posting, I have to do this, I have to do that. And in that, sometimes you maybe lose a bit of the flavor for the journey as well. So it is good just to take a breather and kind of realign with why you're doing what you do in the first place. Speaking of which, you mentioned before that there are different gyms with different vibes. As someone who has an incredible ball gut, right? Like, you are just out here representing, showing off. It's fantastic. What is the response from people like when you are at the gym? Do people kind of come at you with this weird notion of like, hey, you've got these great muscles, but this big belly, I don't understand where you went wrong, buddy, but have you thought about not eating cake? Like, what is the kind of commentary or feedback that people have for you?
um, there's there's definitely at least like I make the joke at least like once a year, like my gym will do something like a weight loss journey or like a weight loss competition, and they like the front desk person will nudge me like, interested, like no thank you. I would say that, like, I go to my gym because it's close and convenient to where I live. It is near a college campus, so the overwhelming majority of the people in the room are 25. I'm I'm 42 at this point, so like I feel like I'm most people's dads. I feel like in the room at this point. Uh, I'm also married to someone who is currently very lean, and so I think I think they see the two of us together. They will typically ask him for more advice. Like they probably won't approach me for advice on like how to like look lean and big. But I just don't think they know what to do with me most of the time. They just kind of give me a wide berth.
I feel like looking at you, like if I was going to gym, I feel like you're the kind of guy that I would want to go up to the most. Like you're the visual. Well, I mean, obviously bias as a gainer, but like if I'm going to a gym to like try and build some muscle, I feel like I'm going to look for the beefiest meatball in the room to do the thing. So I feel like you would be the obvious choice. But then that's a projected expectation.
Well, and it also has to do with like the type of crowd I'm around. So again, like I'm around like 20 somethings. Like when I was 22, I thought I would have thought like someone like who looks like a husband is like the ideal body for a gay man. So but if I was, I don't know, if I was in more of like a bearish community or like if I was around like, I would like hearing about if I was in a gym there, oh, definitely, someone's definitely going to come up and say hi or want to talk because that's just my crowd, right? Or that's us. But my current gym, not so much. It's just like mostly um, straight college kids.
Fair enough. And in comparison to that, like, what is the response from the gainer community, right? Because again, I feel like it's very easy to have the conversation about like muscle in its little silo, fat as it is, but as someone who really straddles the line of both, like, do you find that people are trying to pull you one way or the other? Or do you feel that people are like really celebrating the fact that you're doing both?
Uh, it can be both. So the interactions that I might have on Grommr, there's definitely people who like people will project onto you whatever fantasy that they have for you or for like a big guy, right? So there's definitely a group of people who would be horribly excited if I just gave up on the gym and just really just went heavily into Gatorism and just really pounded down the food. Um, and then there's some people who really celebrate it, who like are really big into the combo. And so I kind of take away from the conversation like, what do I want from my body, and am I moving towards that goal directly? It's so, while I might have those conversations with people on Grommr, I just keep in mind that like, well, this person's playing out a certain fantasy in their head, and it may not completely align with my reality.
That's fair, and that also comes back to yet another common trope that we come across on the podcast, which is this delineating fantasy and reality, and how quite interestingly people struggle at times to understand that, which is wild to me, but it seems to affect a lot of people.
I foresee that happening more now that AI is becoming such a big thing that like Tumblr is just stacked with like just AI images of this uh, of just extremes of guys that like there's no way that could exist, right? But like you look at it, you're like, well, that's hot. Like I wish I could look like that.
You know, AI is an interesting conversation point because obviously that's such a prevalence now, and you see this strong sense of people projecting this firm fantasy because, like, you don't necessarily see a lot of like big boys or even like normal size big boys. Like they are all just blubberific muscle to the a ninth end degree, just in these images, and I find that very fascinating that people are still projecting this firm fantasy of what is like kind of impossible for us to achieve, right? And yet we're still championing this. I don't know. Tim, what do you think about all that?
Specifically about AI.
Well, yeah, and
The
the fact that it goes like from what I see, the examples of AI that people are using is just extreme beyond what the realities of attainment are.
yeah,
And that's kind of fascinating to me that people aren't replicating what is possible
but
as a
people have never have. They never have though. I mean, if you look at any art, it's always more flattering than the truth. Like that's kind of the point of art is that it's supposed to. I mean, the actual function of art is to comment on society, but most people or artists throughout history have embellished and made things look more beautiful than they really are. I mean, look at any portrait of a royal. Like they didn't look that pretty in real life. So as I enjoy it as well. Like I enjoy scrolling through Tumblr, and it's even on Instagram now. There's a lot of like gainer related or gainer AI related profiles that are interesting to look at. Though I do wonder if it's going to lead to a greater like Big Bull was saying, like a greater degree of body dysmorphia because like now these are completely unachievable. Like these are, it's kind of like when we were looking at Warren Davis illustrations and we were like, oh, I'd love to be like a Warren, but that's not possible because Warren's illustrations defied physics, gravity, and anatomy, and AI images do the exact same thing. So I kind of feel like we've just swapped out one for the other.
Mm. And actually, on that point, Big Bull, how much did Warren Davis's artwork influence your body goals back in the day?
Is it that obvious?
I mean, come on. It amazes. Do you know what is amazing though? Talking to some of these young Zoomer gainers who are like, they don't know who Warren Davis is. And I'm not trying to say that they're wrong and stupid, but I'm so fucking confused. Like
But
Arabs,
they wouldn't.
no, but like I still see people sharing the exact same art pieces. Like it amazes me that there are people who do not know this reference point. But
There are young queer people. I was gonna say gay, but and I suppose maybe it actually does only apply to young gay men. But there are plenty of them that don't know about Tom of Finland.
I mean, on that point, thoughts on Tom of Finland, Big Bull?
No, definitely. Like it was, like that, it made a huge impression on. Like this was like when I was still doing dial-up internet. Like Tom of Finland photos and Warren Davis photos were like incredibly made an incredible difference on me. Like just a huge impression.
I mean, I, being my age bracket, discovered Tom of Finland after learning about Warren Davis. But it's really quite interesting to see that like through line of inspiration, right? Like you can see all of Warren Davis and see that fully reflected in Tom of Finland, but also see Tom of Finland's inspirations with military and with leather and the way it's presented, that sheen, that shine, that form, that shape. But also through that, again, talking about your journey and maybe a little bit about how people have inspired you in the past. And if I can ask, is there anyone in particular that inspired you on your journey?
I mean, I'd say yes, but I hate to call them out. I just uh, like I'd say like Meatball. I feel like when I first saw images of him putting on weight, that made me feel like that's what I want. That's the size I want. Honestly, I think what made the difference was just being around those types of guys. Like before when I was like super lean, I didn't have that exposure to like any muscle gainers or gainers in my life, and so it really wasn't to like just going to these gay events where like there's muscle gainers or gainers present that like it just makes a huge difference being around them that you realize like yeah like this is what I want.
100%. Again, tying into conversations about the importance we've had, conversation we've had about the importance of events and going and building community. Yes, Instagram is great, Grommr is fine. Nothing, and I repeat, nothing will ever supersede what you can experience and feel when you meet people in real life. The quality of the relationships you can develop, especially with people who are local to you, it will blow your mind. And as Big Bull is saying, gainers go to events. Big boys go to events. And people aren't as segregated as sometimes we build it up to be. So you'd be surprised if you go, not necessarily to a Grommr or to whatever, but just to like Bear Pride or whatever events that are going on in your local area, you will be surprised at who rocks up and who will be willing to have a conversation with you.
But honestly, like I think that's what I found most surprising was the fact that like I thought when I was scared to go ahead and start putting on weight, I was afraid to be ostracized by like skates, but like it's really surprising and refreshing how you go to almost any event and there's guys who are just going to be about the belly. Like there's going to be people who are just come up to you and want to give you belly rubs, and I love it. Like it helps me feel more confident about what I'm doing and how I look. So
I want to ask here, and this one maybe just if your opinion on this, but When there are gainers, and I kind of asked about this before, people who are on one side or the other, maybe trying to pull you one way or the other. Do you feel that there are some gainers that maybe limit themselves when they don't consider the idea of maybe merging both the fat and the muscle together?
Oh, 100%. I mean, this kind of ties back to what we talked about feeling comfortable in a gym environment. I think there's a lot of guys who just they're kind of scared to take that first step to walk in a gym for the first time or to be in some place that it's going to make you feel uncomfortable. And that's why I just encourage people to really try to find like the right vibe that you can be somewhere that you feel comfortable. Because like honestly, like I love both of them. I love the muscle and I love the belly. Like having them together is yeah, highly recommend.
10 out of 10. Chef's kiss, compliments to the chef and all that. Um, and I mean, on that point, like, obviously we've got, not to say that they are such distinct terms. You've got gainer and muscle gainer, right? Like, gaining is the consistent thread between them. But, like, as someone who pursues both, do you use either label, both labels, or is there, like, maybe a term that you apply to yourself? Because you're like, what I do maybe kind of goes a bit beyond the fact that there are those two identities. Maybe what you do is something a little bit new.
Yeah, so like I feel like I use muscle gainer mostly. It still feels like a weird term, like coming from like the bodybuilding world, like muscle gainer just sounds like any guy who wants to be like huge and jacked. Like I don't know, it's like I don't know if there's a really good term for it. So that's what I use muscle gainer mostly, but I guess maybe like muscled gainer would be better, or like I don't know.
Well, we kind of covered this on our original muscle gaining episode. There's a sort of affection within, typical fat gaining circles where it's like, oh, chubs, pig, terms that maybe some people don't like, but some people do like, and there's a sort of a selection. I offered up meatball as a bit of an affectionate
Ooh,
term, like, how you doing, meatball? You doing good there, meatball? Like, just like nice and meaty and round, just so there.
yes. If you call me meatball, I'd be about it.
So, talking a little bit, because we got some listener questions here. One person asked, "How did you get started with muscle?" And I know you've kind of given us a bit of that, but you talked before as well about motivation. So maybe we'll pivot that question slightly. Like, how do you develop that motivation when it comes to the necessary things for muscle, that kind of regimented certain exercises, getting up at a certain hour, going to a certain place, eating certain things? How do you kind of find it best to develop those skills before they become a habit?
So for me, there was like a middle area that I didn't discuss earlier. And that was when I got out of high school, and I was again like no muscle, no fat, just bones. Um, what first got me into the gym and like really first got me into like the idea of having a regimen was actually I got into rowing, and like it's it's not a sport for any of us now. So rowing was the one sport that if you weighed next to nothing, better off you were. So like that's what got me like being in a team, going into the gym to actually do a workout, actually eating more than like next to nothing. Because like I never ate. Like I was on Adderall and Ritalin since I was like 10. So I'd go all day without eating. Like not even intentional. Just didn't realize I wasn't eating. Right. It's the the byproduct of that medication. So like being able to like focus on like no, you really have to eat. You have to eat every 2 hours, and that's what made the difference. Is that so that was kind of like my dipping my toe in the water was going through a sport like rowing. But I mean, even now though, like for anyone who's just starting out, like you're post college and you want to get started, I'd say start with a trainer at least for a few weeks to just get you set up with like a week split, like how you're going to break up the muscle groups throughout the week, get you set up with like some sort of diet plan if you're curious about what to eat. I do use a couple of apps. Like I use my Fitness Pal, I think, for tracking calories now. Been using that for like a decade, um, just to just to keep me understanding of like if I'm eating enough.
Mm. And strong recommendation for MyFitnessPal. I'm sure we've talked about it before, but one of the features is the meal section where you can basically custom build a sort of dietary, a nutrition plan based on the meals that you create, right? And so even just as a fat gainer, like if I want to look at calories, but I also want to look at vitamins, nutrients, and whatnot, it'll track that. So maybe sometimes we don't know the exact numbers of things because we're not, looking at packages for everything, but it makes it a very easy thing to do. If you want to do more home cooking, but still kind of have that nutrition guide to like track what you're consuming, it's really helpful for that, you know? Another question here is, are gym guys actually welcoming with newbies? And this is, I think, a very interesting question because I feel like you see both on TikTok. You see guys who are very impassionate about saying, no, new person comes in, you make friends with them, you talk to them, you make sure they're doing okay because you don't want to be the dude who kicks someone out of the gym because you're a dickhead. Versus guys who are like, nah, get out of here, you're wasting my time, you're taking up the machines, the racks I need to use. Like, what is your take on that?
I think people are more scared to talk to someone they don't know at the gym than they should be. And the reality is that if you see someone who looks like they know what they're doing, and you yourself are motivated, you're in there, you're moving along, and you have a genuine, honest question. Anytime someone's asked me a question, I absolutely will stop what I'm doing and answer and give like the fullest amount of information that I think is necessary. For myself, I'm never dismissive towards someone who's going to ask me a question like that. I think, like coming from the mentality of someone who's an avid gym goer for the last 2 decades, is that the only thing that would frustrate me is if I see you just wasting time. Like if you're just sitting on a piece of equipment and you're texting someone for like 30 minutes, like that'll frustrate and anger me. But aside from that, though, like if you're in there, like I'm glad to have you in there. Like I'm glad that you're making changes or that you're striving for your goal.
Well, coming up near the end of the questions we had, is there any aspect of this kind of muscle fat experience that we haven't talked on yet that you want to chat about?
I think I just try to just enjoy the experience as much as I can. I definitely have goals to try to get bigger. I'm always trying to get bigger. I think I think everyone's always trying to get bigger on this podcast. But I also realize that there's gonna be a certain point in my life to where I won't be able to work out as hard as I am right now. And so to just enjoy the experience for as much as you can, for as long as you can.
I like that. And yeah, no, I think that's wonderful. And really, BigBull, just to say here, thank you so much for sharing your experiences and for granting us the opportunity to learn a little bit more about you today, because I think what you've achieved with your body is just incredible. And I think for anyone out there who's looking to make an incredible change in their lives, because I've seen some photos you've shared recently, like, no joke, you was a scrawny dude, like, and that is a reassurance for, I think especially people like Tim and myself, we talk about this a lot. It's not that we aren't putting in the effort. Sometimes it's genetics, sometimes it's, daily life gets in the way, but seeing someone like yourself who was able to go from being truly so small to so incredibly large really gives the confidence to say that, it's possible for everyone. And I'm really looking forward to seeing what comes next for you, dude. So thank you again for your time today. We appreciate it.
Of course, guys. I'm glad to be on here, and thanks for having me on.
Of course. Now, where can our listeners find you online?
On Instagram as prestonbrok with BROK for the last name. And that's where I'm usually most active, honestly. I'm on Twitter under the same name. So feel free, drop me a line.
Fantastic. Well, that's it for another fantastic week here on Thicc Radio. Please remember to like and subscribe, rate us 5 stars, give us a good review, goddammit. Now, if you like this episode, the podcast, or just us in general, share it with your friends. Encourage them to tune in. You can find me on Instagram and BlueSky at stannnum.
And you can find me on Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and TikTok at thiccmouse. You can also look us up on Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok at Thicc Radio, or at our website at podpage.com/Thicc Radio. If you want to submit a voice note or become a financial supporter of the show, you can find the links in the show notes, and you can always write us at thiccradio@gmail.com. So until next time, bye, Fats.
Bye, Fats.
Bye, Fats.
Let's talk about it.
Thicc Radio is a Patreon and Enter app podcast produced by stannnum and Thicc.
Mixed and mastered by stannnum.
Our artwork is provided by Lokitsu.
Our theme song is provided by Spotify Cream.